Danny Masterson, Elon Musk, Donald Trump, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Harvey Weinstein, and more. Hello everyone and welcome to this week's Cult News Update. I'm your speaker Casey, host of the Cult Vault podcast, and today we are going to be looking at some of the top news stories currently in the cultiverse, starting off with a brief update on the currently unfolding Danny Masterson trial taking place in a Los Angeles courthouse. Danny Masterson, a Hollywood actor and Scientologist, has been on trial for a couple of weeks now, and updates on the first parts of the trial can be found in earlier episodes of the Cult News. If you find this content interesting or helpful, please consider hitting the like and subscribe button to get updates on all new content. And now, onto the show. All the information in this video regarding the Masterson trial and Scientology is taken from Tony Ortega's Twitter and website, tonyortega.org. Ortega, a longtime exposer of Scientology, is bringing updates live from the courthouse throughout the trials, so please consider subscribing to his website for live updates as they come through. So far in the trial, Jane Doe 1 and 3 have taken the stand and been subjected to cross-examination. This week, Jane Doe 2 takes the stand, testifying how she felt suspiciously intoxicated after one drink in Masterson's presence, and how the defense are upset by Leah Remini's talk of the trial on her Twitter, a reoccurring theme on the defense's part. Soon, actress Jordan Lass testified as a best friend of Jane Doe 2's in 2003, where she explains that Jane Doe 2 told her about being attacked by Danny Masterson. Not long after this, Jane Doe 2's mother would testify about when she was told by her daughter that she was attacked in 2003 by Danny Masterson. Day 15 started with an expert being placed on the stand, discussing the ways that women in relationships react to sexual assault from their partners, and the defense's cross-examination then proceeded to question the basis of the psychological research itself. Mariah O'Brien was soon called to the stand by prosecutors to testify, being told by Jane Doe 2 about her being assaulted by Masterson, with LAPD detective Javier Vargas taking the stand in that afternoon. There's other news that comes from the world of Scientology amidst the Masterson trial, and that includes news of Paul Haggis, Hollywood writer and director. A former Scientologist who was involved for 3 decades, has been subjected to allegations of sexual assault since his departure from the church. After standing trial for these allegations, it was determined this week that Haggis would have to pay over $7 million in damages to the victim after being found liable for these sexual assaults, with charges linked to a 2013 repeated sexual assault on a woman that he left a party with. This has received mixed emotions in the media, with Leah Remini coming forward in support of Paul Haggis to talk about how this is fair gaming from the Church of Scientology, who are behind the rape allegations themselves. But that is not all that has been happening in the news this week regarding Scientology. A substantial financial donor of the church has died. An OT Level 8 Scientologist, Steve Anderson, passed away amidst these trials and the release of the successful memoir recently published by former head of Scientology security turned whistleblower Mike Rinder, titled A Billion Years. Perhaps this is more fuel to the fire that is the demise of Scientology. By day 16 of the Masterson trial, there was an argument in the courtroom on whether an additional Jane Doe would be allowed to take the stand to testify, taking the count from 3 Jane Does to 4. Of course, the defense were completely against this and did all they could to prevent it, but eventually Judge Olmedo allowed Jane Doe 4 permission to testify in the trial to a 1994 incident where Masterson allegedly assaulted her. To make things even stranger, Masterson's sister-in-law made an online post about regrets that she has with men from her past, and this is coming after she has attended some of the Masterson trial. Lisa Marie Presley came forward saying that she was willing to testify on how the Church of Scientology ordered her to obstruct justice after she was told personally by one of Masterson's victims that they had been assaulted by him, and how Presley herself agreed not to go to the authorities. Although it was ultimately determined that Presley wouldn't testify, this was a huge swing against Masterson and Scientology. Soon, actress Trisha Vesey, known as Jane Doe 4, who has given permission for her name to be shared by the underground bunker, has endured cross-examination after taking the stand. And today we head into day 20 of the trial. There is no clear indication which way the trial will conclude, but things are moving quickly. Down the hall in the same Los Angeles courthouse, Jane Does have been coming forward to testify against Harvey Weinstein, providing personal experiences of being abused by him. Jezebel.com has reported that the testimony seemed to be only getting worse when they were horrific enough to begin with. Although this trial is moving slower than the Masterson one, both on trial for similar charges, the trial itself is still well underway. HBO's The Vow Part 2 released the 4th episode in its new series this week, and this was probably the most difficult episode to watch so far. There was a reenacted testimony from Nancy Salzman's daughter Lauren when she took the stand in the Keith Raniere trial. Longtime member of the now defunct Human Potential cult NXIVM, led by her own mother Nancy Salzman and cult leader Keith Raniere, who is now serving a 120-year sentence for various crimes including trafficking, testified against Raniere in the trial regarding the undue influence that was placed on her. Nancy Salzman claims she had no idea that her daughter was being groomed, abused and exploited by her business partner, and that she herself was a victim to Raniere's coercive control. Lauren Salzman's testimony left a pit in the bottom of my stomach as she detailed the sheer hypocrisy and depravity of Raniere. Many people on Twitter have expressed their thoughts on the documentary, with former members claiming Nancy Salzman was in fact having sexual relations with Raniere herself, that she knew of everything happening, with some people suggesting that she was even gratified by parts of what was happening. Have you tuned into the series so far? And if you have, what are your thoughts? I've been watching a few other things this week, which I will express my thoughts on in other videos, which you will find later on my channel. Guardian.com has an article by Sarah DeGuid, who has written about her experiences as an unhappy teenager during her parents' divorce, which led to her falling into the clutches of a charismatic leader. At the age of 16 in 1994, Sarah was struggling to get out of bed each day, suffering potentially with depression, when one day she met Margaret, a woman with long blonde hair who drove a Rolls-Royce. Now, that to me, as some of you will know, is already a pretty big red flag if you consider other notorious cult leaders from history such as Bhagwan Shree Rajneesh or James Edward Baker of the Source family. Which is unfortunate because I'm sure they're lovely vehicles. Margaret called herself a witch, and she would preach strict vegetarianism, yet occasionally ate meat. She would get followers to sit in a dark circle and take part in confessions where members would talk about all sorts of personal experiences, including sexual assault, before taking part in death and rebirth rituals, all for the sake of recovery from abuse. The article goes on to talk about Sarah's various abuses endured under Margaret's leadership of the psychological therapy cult, with a mention of Sarah's second book, The Wilderness, which is now out and available for purchase. The Wall Street Journal has an article by Nicole Guyon about the cult of Garmin and why athletes stick to this brand over all others. Detailed in the article are the pros and cons of Garmin's devices, noting that the user face itself is easy and appealing, while the devices themselves are clunky with far too much variety. The closing paragraph reads, "Clearly Garmin's useful features have lots of athletes hooked. The function over form devices can do a ton, far more than what I've covered here. But if Apple or Samsung overhauled some athlete-focused features with a more accessible interface, then perhaps they could finally break Garmin's hold on this high-spending, high-activity club." Cosmopolitan has reported on Netflix's recent drop of Orgasm Inc., the story of One Taste. And as some of you may know, I have 2 interviews in the back catalogue of my podcast where I have interviewed former members of One Taste, in episodes 126 and 184, which you can listen to today. Episode 126 features an interview with Ruan, who appeared in the Netflix documentary, giving his testimony on his experiences of the group. The article by Jade Biggs echoes much of what is covered in the documentary without offering any personal take on the Netflix film itself. I've decided to offer my own thoughts on a different video coming this week, along with what some other viewers of the documentary thought. If you've watched it, please put your comments below. It's always interesting to see different people's takes on these types of documentaries. Stephanie Nolasco for Fox News reports that Lola Blanc and Megan Elizabeth have teamed up to create a podcast called Trust Me, looking at extreme beliefs and manipulation, explaining how the stories of resilience can create an environment where people can thrive. The article goes on to detail the content you can find on the podcast, along with some of the guests who have been featured on the show, and where you can expect to find the podcast Trust Me. Nebraska Today has reported that Lindsay Mazurak, assistant professor in the Department of Classical Studies at Indiana University, gave a lecture last week on the role of women in cults during the Roman Empire. A paragraph of the article details what the lecture would include, stating, "From neo-pagans to feminists, many today think of Isis as a goddess of and for women. Given that Isis was a patron of childbirth and marriage, two activities closely associated with women in antiquity, this assumption is not entirely off the mark. Women also appear frequently in artistic depictions of the Isis cult, from wall paintings to Pompeii to gravestones in Athens. But women were largely excluded from priesthoods and other positions of power and were marginalized further through cult regulations," which, interestingly, sounds quite similar to a lot of religious groups in today's age. Religion News Service has reported that young Americans are more liberal than old Americans, according to a recent poll. And despite this, there is a far-right group of young people who seem to be making a name for themselves. The article by Yone Shimron states Kyle Spencer, a longtime journalist who has reported about education for the New York Times and Politico, has now written a book on the effort, Raising Them Right, the untold story of America's ultra-conservative youth movement and its plot for power. It probes the key players and their tactics. Perhaps the liberal youngsters of America are responsible for the events of this week's midterm voting results in America. While some states are painted red, with the likes of Marjorie Taylor Greene, described as a businesswoman and far-right evangelical and conspiracy theorist, winning 65% of the votes in the state of Georgia to continue serving the state's 14th congressional district, there were other surprising results in the midterm votes. No landslide win for Republicans, but rather the blue streaking the country, with Tammy Baldwin winning the majority for the state of Wisconsin. Baldwin is the first openly gay person to be elected to Senate, which is a significant moment for American history. While Sky News Australia has reported that there will always be die-hard fans that will stick with Trump and his almost cult of personality, former GOP Governor of New Jersey Christine Todd Whitman has condemned the Republican Party for their continued allegiance to Trump, claiming that she hopes all the crazies win the midterm elections so that America will have to live with their decisions. And although this didn't happen, many are saying that this isn't the end of the Trump era, and many are saying that this is just what America needed to begin their journey away from Donald Trump. The first week of Elon Musk taking over Twitter saw mass layoffs and structure changes, as reported by TheVerge.com, written by Alex Heath. A Q&A that lasted almost an hour with remaining Twitter employees showed the workers' concerns, which didn't seem to stop Musk from bringing back previously banned accounts such as Kanye West's. Musk has also threatened to start charging $8 a month for verified accounts to keep their blue ticks. This caused many people to start renaming their accounts Elon Musk, which continued for a few days before Musk announced that all accounts claiming to have his name would be banned. Many celebrities have already stepped away from the platform, with many more threatening to do the same, amid these changes and power plays that Musk seems to be performing. We will see where things are in a few weeks. That is the end of this week's Cult News. There will be more updates next week. If you found this content helpful or interesting, please consider subscribing to the channel and liking this video. I'm your speaker Casey, host of the Cult Vault podcast.